Warning: this video contains details of real crime cases. Watch with caution. If you're a fan of true crime investigations and want to follow more stories like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any case. In the quiet suburbs of Dayton, Ohio, Sarah Thompson's childhood unfolded like many others in America's heartland. Born to middle-class parents, Sarah's early years were marked by the typical ebb and flow of small-town life. Her father, a local mechanic, and her mother, an elementary school teacher, instilled in her a strong work ethic and a sense of duty that would shape her future. As Sarah navigated through her teenage years at Oakwood High School, her drive and determination set her apart. She excelled in her studies, particularly in mathematics and physical education, often leading her classmates in group projects and extracurricular activities. It was during these formative years that Sarah's interest in serving her country began to take root. Upon graduating high school in 2008, Sarah made a decision that would alter the course of her life. Rather than following the well-worn path to college like many of her peers, she enlisted in the United States Navy. This choice, while surprising to some, seemed a natural progression for those who knew Sarah best. Her disciplined nature and unwavering commitment to excellence made her an ideal candidate for military service. Sarah's naval career began with a rigorous boot camp at the Great Lakes Naval Training Center in Illinois. The grueling physical demands and strict discipline of military life seemed to invigorate rather than deter her. She thrived in this structured environment, quickly earning the respect of both her superiors and fellow recruits. As she progressed through her training and early assignments, Sarah's attention to detail and meticulous approach to her duties did not go unnoticed. Whether she was maintaining critical equipment or assisting in complex naval operations, her work was consistently exemplary. Her uniform was always impeccable, her reports thorough and precise. These qualities rapidly propelled her through the ranks. By 2019, at the age of 29, Sarah had risen to the rank of lieutenant, stationed at Naval Station Mayport in Jacksonville, Florida. Her colleagues often remarked on her dedication, with one fellow officer noting, "Lieutenant Thompson embodies the very best of what we strive for in the Navy." Her commitment to excellence is unparalleled. Despite her professional success, Sarah's personal life had remained relatively quiet. She was known to be private, focusing primarily on her career and occasionally volunteering at the local animal shelter during her off hours. However, this changed dramatically when she met Eric Carson at a mutual friend's barbecue in early 2018. Eric, a charismatic civilian contractor working with the Navy, swept Sarah off her feet with his charm and seeming understanding of her demanding career. Their whirlwind romance progressed rapidly, culminating in a small, intimate wedding ceremony just 5 months after their first meeting. Initially, Sarah's colleagues and friends were thrilled to see her find happiness in her personal life. However, as the weeks turned into months, subtle changes in Sarah's demeanor began to surface. The once outgoing and confident officer became increasingly withdrawn. She started to decline invitations to social gatherings, and her typically impeccable appearance occasionally showed signs of neglect. Those closest to Sarah noticed that Eric's presence seemed to cast a shadow over her vibrant personality. He would often appear unannounced at her workplace, insisting on driving her home or questioning her about her daily activities. Sarah's responses to concerns raised by friends were always dismissive, insisting that Eric was simply protective and caring. As 2019 progressed, the disconnect between Sarah's professional excellence and her increasingly troubled personal life became more apparent. The once unstoppable force in the Navy seemed to be slowly dimming, caught in a web of conflicting loyalties and hidden struggles. Little did anyone know that these changes were merely the prelude to a tragedy that would shock the naval community and the quiet Jacksonville neighborhood Sarah and Eric called home. The morning of April 18, 2019, dawned like any other in the peaceful suburban neighborhood of Mandarin, Jacksonville. The quiet streets, lined with oak trees draped in Spanish moss, gave no indication of the horror that had unfolded behind the walls of the Thompson Carson residence. At 7:23 a.m., the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office received a frantic 911 call. The caller, identified as Eric Carson, was audibly distraught, his voice cracking as he struggled to form coherent sentences. "My wife, she's not moving. There's blood everywhere. Oh God, please help. The dispatcher calmly extracted the address and dispatched emergency services immediately. First responders arrived at the scene within minutes, their sirens piercing the morning calm. As they approached the modest two-story home, nothing seemed amiss from the outside. The manicured lawn and neatly trimmed hedges painted a picture of suburban tranquility. It wasn't until they entered the house that the true extent of the tragedy became apparent. The body of Lieutenant Sarah Thompson was discovered in the home office on the ground floor. The scene that greeted the officers was one of unimaginable violence. Sarah lay face down on the hardwood floor, surrounded by a pool of her own blood. Her Navy uniform, usually pristine, was now a canvas of crimson, torn and disheveled. Forensic investigators, led by Detective Maria Sanchez, meticulously documented the crime scene. Their preliminary findings painted a grim picture of Sarah's final moments. The cause of death appeared to be a combination of multiple stab wounds and strangulation. The murder weapon, identified as a pair of office scissors, was found discarded near the body, its blades caked with dried blood. The brutality of the attack was evident. The autopsy report would later reveal that Sarah had been stabbed 17 times, with particular ferocity directed at her face and neck. The fatal blow had severed her carotid artery, leading to rapid blood loss. In addition to the stab wounds, ligature marks on her neck indicated that she had been strangled with what appeared to be a leather belt, found loosely wrapped around her neck. As crime scene technicians combed the house for evidence, one detail stood out to the investigators. There were no signs of forced entry. The doors and windows were intact, the alarm system hadn't been triggered, and nothing appeared to be missing from the home. This crucial piece of information immediately narrowed the focus of the investigation to those who had access to the house or were close to Sarah. Eric Carson, who had made the 911 call, was found by the officers in a state of shock. Sitting on the front porch, his hands and clothes stained with blood, he claimed to have discovered Sarah's body when he returned home from an early morning run. His distress appeared genuine, but experienced detectives knew that appearances could be deceiving. As news of the murder spread, the tight-knit naval community at Mayport was thrown into turmoil. Sarah Thompson had been a respected officer, known for her professionalism and dedication. The brutal nature of her death sent shockwaves through the ranks, leaving her colleagues and superiors struggling to comprehend the tragedy. In the days that followed, the Thompson-Carson residence became the epicenter of an intense investigation. Yellow police tape cordoned off the property, and a constant stream of investigators and forensic experts moved in and out of the house. The quiet neighborhood found itself thrust into the spotlight as local news vans parked along the street, their reporters eager for any updates on the shocking crime that had shattered their community's sense of security. As the investigation into Sarah Thompson's murder progressed, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office found themselves delving deeper into a web of complex relationships and hidden truths. Detective Maria Sanchez, leading the case, pursued every lead with relentless determination. Her office walls soon covered with timelines, photographs, and potential suspects. Eric Carson, Sarah's husband, quickly became the primary focus of the investigation. Initially presenting as a grieving widower, inconsistencies in his story began to emerge under scrutiny. His alibi for the night of the murder, a pre-dawn run followed by breakfast at a local diner, couldn't be corroborated by witnesses or security footage. Moreover, his demeanor during questioning shifted from distraught to defensive as the days wore on. Mr. Carson's behavior raised red flags, Detective Sanchez noted in her case files. His responses became increasingly evasive, particularly when pressed about the state of his marriage to Lieutenant Thompson. The turning point came when investigators uncovered a series of heated email exchanges between Sarah and Eric dated just weeks before her death. These messages revealed a marriage in turmoil, with Eric confronting Sarah about a deeply personal secret she had kept from him. Sarah was a transgender woman who had transitioned before joining the Navy. This revelation cast the case in a new light. Friends and colleagues of Sarah, when interviewed, spoke of her fear of being outed and the potential impact on her military career. Lieutenant James Rodriguez, a close friend, recalled a conversation with Sarah. She was terrified Eric would expose her. She loved the Navy. It was her life. The fear of losing it all was consuming her. As detectives dug deeper, they discovered that Eric's reaction to learning about Sarah's past had been volatile. Neighbors reported overhearing intense arguments from the Thompson-Carson home in the weeks leading up to the murder. One neighbor, elderly Mrs. Gladys Perkins, recounted a particularly disturbing incident. "I heard shouting, things breaking. Then I saw Sarah run out of the house in tears. It was awful." However, Eric Carson wasn't the only person of interest to emerge as the investigation unfolded. Angela Carson, Eric's mother, also came under scrutiny. Known for her conservative views and outspoken nature, Angela had never approved of her son's hasty marriage to Sarah. Investigators learned of a strained relationship between Angela and her daughter-in-law, marked by thinly veiled hostility and gossip. Angela Carson was openly disparaging of Sarah in social circles, noted Detective Sanchez. "We received multiple reports of her spreading malicious rumors about Sarah's character and background. Further complicating matters, financial records revealed that Angela Carson was deeply in debt, owing significant sums to local loan sharks. This discovery led investigators to explore potential connections between Angela's financial troubles and Sarah's murder. As the investigation reached its second week, a breakthrough came in the form of text messages recovered from Angela's phone. These messages, exchanged with a known local criminal, Darnell Jackson, hinted at a desperate plea for help with her debts. One cryptic message from Jackson read, "You know what needs to be done? Time's running out." This new information shifted the focus of the investigation. Was Angela Carson somehow involved in her daughter-in-law's death? Could she have orchestrated the murder to prevent Sarah from revealing her true identity, potentially embarrassing the family? Or was there a more sinister connection between Angela's debts and Sarah's untimely demise? As Detective Sanchez and her team pursued these new leads, the case grew increasingly complex, with each revelation adding another layer to an already intricate puzzle. The investigation into Sarah Thompson's murder took a dramatic turn in early May 2019, when Detective Maria Sanchez received an anonymous tip. The caller, speaking in hushed tones, directed the police to look closer at the connection between Angela Carson and Darnell Jackson, a notorious figure in Jacksonville's criminal underworld. Acting on this lead, the detectives obtained a warrant to delve deeper into Angela's communications. What they uncovered was a chilling trail of messages that painted a picture of desperation and potential conspiracy. In one particularly damning exchange, dated just 3 days before Sarah's murder, Darnell wrote to Angela, "Time's up, Angela. You either pay up, or I start collecting in other ways. Your son's wife might be interested to know about our little arrangement." Angela's reply was equally alarming. "Please, Darnell, I'll do anything. Just leave my family out of this." As investigators pieced together the timeline, a disturbing narrative began to emerge. Angela Carson, driven to the brink by her mounting debts, had become entangled with Jackson's criminal enterprise. What started as a simple loan had spiraled into a web of threats and coercion. Detective Sanchez, presenting her findings to the task force, theorized, it appears that Angela Carson was being pressured by Jackson to take drastic action. The threat to expose their connection to Sarah could have been the catalyst for what happened next. The investigation shifted to Darnell Jackson. Known to law enforcement but notoriously difficult to pin down, Jackson had a history of using others to do his dirty work. A series of stakeouts and undercover operations finally yielded results when one of Jackson's lower-level associates was arrested on an unrelated charge. In exchange for leniency, the associate, Marcus Ledbetter, provided crucial information. He revealed that Jackson had indeed been putting pressure on Angela Carson to repay her debts. However, the situation had escalated beyond mere financial concerns. Darnell found out something big about the military lady, Ledbetter told the detectives during a tense interrogation. He thought he could use it for blackmail, but it backfired. Angela freaked out, saying it would ruin her family if it got out. This revelation cast the case in an entirely new light. Had Angela, in a desperate attempt to protect her family's reputation and resolve her debt, taken matters into her own hands? Or had Darnell Jackson decided to eliminate the threat directly? As the detectives grappled with these new possibilities, they revisited the crime scene evidence with fresh eyes. A partial fingerprint found on the murder weapon, previously unmatched, was run through the system again. This time, it returned a hit, Marcus Ledbetter. This connection between the murder weapon and Jackson's associate was the break the case needed. It provided the crucial link between the crime and the shadowy world of Darnell Jackson. Detective Sanchez, addressing her team, emphasized the gravity of their discovery. We're no longer looking at just a domestic dispute gone wrong. This has all the hallmarks of a calculated hit, possibly orchestrated by Jackson, with Angela Carson as either a willing participant or an unwitting pawn. As the sun set on another day of the investigation, the team prepared for what promised to be a complex and dangerous next phase. They were no longer just solving a murder. They were unraveling a conspiracy that threatened to implicate some of Jacksonville's most notorious criminals. As the investigation into Sarah Thompson's murder reached its climax, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office moved swiftly to bring the perpetrators to justice. On May 15, 2019, in a coordinated operation that involved multiple units, Eric Carson was arrested at his place of work, a local IT firm. Simultaneously, Angela Carson was taken into custody at her home, and Darnell Jackson was apprehended during a raid on one of his known hideouts. The arrests sent shockwaves through the community. Local news stations broadcast live footage of Eric Carson being led out of his office in handcuffs, his face a mask of disbelief and anger. Angela Carson's arrest was equally dramatic, with neighbors gathering to watch as the elderly woman was escorted to a waiting police car, still protesting her innocence. In the days that followed, as the prosecution built its case, a clearer picture of the events leading to Sarah's death emerged. State Attorney Rebecca Holbrook laid out the charges in a press conference that captivated the nation. Eric Carson has been charged with second-degree murder. Evidence suggests that upon discovering his wife's transgender identity, Mr. Carson reacted with a volatile mix of anger and betrayal. We believe this discovery led to a confrontation that tragically escalated to violence. Holbrook continued, Angela Carson faces charges of conspiracy to commit murder and obstruction of justice. Her involvement with Darnell Jackson and her actions in the wake of Sarah's death paint a picture of a woman driven to desperate measures by debt and fear of scandal. The prosecution's case against Eric Carson was built on a foundation of forensic evidence and testimony from neighbors who had witnessed the deteriorating relationship between the couple. The murder weapon bore his fingerprints, and fibers from his clothing were found on Sarah's body. Angela Carson's role in the tragedy was more complex. While she wasn't directly implicated in the act of murder, her communications with Darnell Jackson and subsequent attempts to mislead investigators formed the basis of the charges against her. Darnell Jackson, already wanted for numerous other crimes, faced additional charges of extortion and conspiracy related to Sarah's death. His arrest was hailed as a significant victory in the ongoing battle against organized crime in Jacksonville. The trial, which began in September 2019, captivated the public's attention. Over the course of 3 weeks, the courtroom became a stage for a drama that touched on issues of identity, acceptance, and the devastating consequences of prejudice and desperation. Eric Carson's defense team attempted to portray him as a man overwhelmed by shock and betrayal, arguing that Sarah's death was the result of a heated argument rather than premeditated murder. However, the prosecution's evidence, including the brutality of the attack and Eric's attempts to cover his tracks, painted a different picture. Angela Carson's testimony provided some of the most dramatic moments of the trial. Breaking down on the stand, she admitted to her involvement with Jackson, but maintained that she never intended for Sarah to be harmed. "I just wanted to protect my family," she sobbed. "I didn't know it would end like this." On October 7, 2019, after 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned their verdict. Eric Carson was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 30 years in prison. Angela Carson was convicted of conspiracy and obstruction, receiving a 10-year sentence. Darnell Jackson, facing multiple charges, was sentenced to life without parole. As the gavel fell for the final time, the courtroom fell silent. The case that had gripped Jacksonville for months had come to an end, but the questions it raised about acceptance, identity, and the hidden struggles many face would linger long after. In the aftermath of the trial, the story of Sarah Thompson continued to resonate throughout Jacksonville and beyond. Her tragic death became a catalyst for discussions about acceptance, identity, and the challenges faced by transgender individuals, particularly those serving in the military. At Naval Station Mayport, where Sarah had served with distinction, a memorial service was held in her honor. Hundreds of sailors, officers, and civilian personnel gathered to pay their respects. Captain Elena Rodriguez, Sarah's commanding officer, delivered a poignant eulogy. Lieutenant Sarah Thompson embodied the very best of the United States Navy. Her dedication, skill, and unwavering commitment to duty were exemplary. Sarah's struggle to be accepted for who she truly was, even as she served her country with honor, is a stark reminder of the work we still have to do as a society and as an institution. The case prompted a review of policies within the Navy regarding LGBTQ+ service members. While the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy had been repealed in 2011, Sarah's story highlighted the ongoing challenges and fears many still faced. In response, the Navy implemented new training programs focused on inclusivity and understanding, naming the initiative Operation Thompson in Sarah's memory. In the civilian sphere, Sarah's story sparked a broader dialogue about transgender rights and acceptance. LGBTQ+ advocacy groups pointed to her case as a tragic example of the dangers faced by individuals forced to hide their true identities. Vigils and marches were held in cities across the country, with participants calling for greater protections and understanding for transgender individuals. The media coverage of the case was extensive, with documentaries, books, and countless articles exploring Sarah's life and the circumstances of her death. One Pulitzer Prize-winning piece, titled Anchored in Truth, the Sarah Thompson story, delved deep into her background, tracing her journey from a small Ohio town to her distinguished naval career and ultimate tragedy. Sarah's parents, John and Mary Wilson, who had supported their daughter throughout her transition and military career, became vocal advocates for transgender rights. In an interview with a national news network, Mary Wilson said, "We lost our daughter twice. First, when she felt she had to hide who she was, and then, tragically, to this senseless act of violence. No parent should have to endure this, and no person should live in fear because of who they are." The ripple effects of Sarah's case extended to the legal system as well. Lawmakers in Florida and several other states introduced Sarah's Law, legislation aimed at increasing penalties for hate crimes against transgender individuals and providing additional resources for LGBTQ+ support services. As years passed, Sarah Thompson's name became synonymous with the ongoing struggle for transgender rights and acceptance, particularly within traditionally conservative institutions like the military. Annual remembrance events at Naval Station Mayport served as a reminder of the progress made and the work still to be done. In a final, poignant tribute, a scholarship fund was established in Sarah's name at her alma mater, Oakwood High School in Dayton, Ohio. The fund provides support for LGBTQ+ students pursuing careers in public service, ensuring that Sarah's legacy of dedication and service continues to inspire future generations. As this chapter in Jacksonville's history came to a close, the story of Sarah Thompson, naval officer, devoted daughter, and reluctant symbol, serves as a powerful reminder of the complexities of identity, the cost of intolerance, and the ongoing journey towards a more inclusive society.